In my previous video, I showed you how to remove and clean the intercooler and pipings of this 2017 Hyundai Accent CRDi. The next job on the list is the removal and cleaning of the intake manifold. If you want to watch the previous video, just click the link on the screen or check the link in the description box below. Before the video starts, I just want to inform you that this video is separated into two parts. The first part of the video consists of the removal and partial cleaning of the intake manifold. The second part is the continuation of the cleaning, preparation, and reinstallation of the intake manifold. You are currently watching the first part of the video. Let's get started. First thing to remove is this throttle body. A throttle body without the throttle plate. There you can see how filthy it is. It seems that it wasn't sealed properly before, the reason why it has a leak on top of it. Use a 10mm socket to remove the bolts. There are 2 bolts at the top and 2 nuts at the bottom. Keep the bolts and nuts aside. After removing the bolts and nuts, pull the throttle body. Just by visual inspection, it is clear that it wasn't sealed properly, causing it to leak from all over the place. Put the bolts and nuts back on so you don't lose them or interchange them with other bolts. Look how dirty it is. It is a nasty intake manifold. Here I tried to remove the gasket. And what I got is a silicone gasket from a silicone gasket maker. There is an O-ring inside, but it wasn't wide enough to seal the throttle body. So they filled the gap with a silicone gasket. It might be good at first, but it won't last long due to the pressure inside the intake system. There are arrows indicated on the cover showing you the direction on how to remove it. Remove the plastic engine cover by lifting it. Here are the 3 notches that keeps the cover in place. It is connected into these plastic fittings. Use a small flathead screwdriver to push the lock of this harness clip. Pull these vacuum hoses. Remove the 2 bolts that holds the map sensor. These are held down by 2 10mm bolts. Then gently pull the map sensor. This map sensor is filled with carbon deposits. The O-ring is still in good condition. The sensor only needs some cleaning. I'm gonna clean it with a contact cleaner later. Before you disconnect the fuel line, open the fuel cap to release the pressure inside. Then close the fuel cap. The fuel lines in this vehicle are quick release. Just press the plastic buttons to release the lock and pull it. Here you can see how the lock activates and deactivates when pressed. Next, grab a 10mm socket or wrench to remove the nut that holds the metal fuel line. Use a 10mm wrench to remove the bolt that holds the solenoid underneath the intake manifold. Grab another wrench and use it as an extension. Remove the other one too. This one is longer compared to the other one. I'm using a 12mm deep socket with an extension bar connected to it. Carefully lift the bolt. Now, depending on the tools you have, you might encounter this. I cannot insert the socket completely because the extension is too long. I have two extensions here. For this vehicle, you need a shorter extension, or might as well customize the tool to save money. For the socket, using a short socket won't work because it needs a narrow end. Using a longer or deep socket will work because it has a longer reach. Take note that I'm using a 1/2 drive. If you use a short socket, the body of the socket will hit the housing of the intake manifold, making the bolt unreachable. Here's a layout about its fasteners. Now it fits perfectly. Remove the rest of the bolts. There's one bolt that I couldn't reach completely with my deep socket, so I'll be using my wrench and another wrench as an extension. In this case, 3/8 drives would probably work better in tight spaces. Once loosened, I can now reach it with my deep socket. Use your 12mm socket again to remove the two bolts that holds the tube connecting from EGR to intake manifold. Next, disconnect the electrical plug connector of the throttle flap actuator. I'm using a small flathead screwdriver to make it easier to unlock the plug. Separate the harness clip from the intake manifold. This is the same from what I did earlier. Now, if you're having a hard time to remove it, you can unlock the zip ties by prying the lock inside using a small flathead screwdriver or tweezers. After that, you just need to push or pull the cable to release it. This can be difficult too. Just be patient and you can do it. I removed the bolts that holds the engine harness. These are all 10mm bolts. These are two 10mm bolts on the top, and there are two 10mm bolts at the bottom. When you remove the bolts, you'll notice that there are two longer bolts and two shorter bolts. The two longer bolts were used at the top of the engine cover, and the two shorter ones were used at the bottom. This is the bolt that holds the intake manifold. Use a 10mm socket to remove it. You also need to remove the main fuel line. Use a 17mm wrench to loosen it. The other one is located here. It is connected to the fuel injection pump. You need to remove this too in order to pull out the main fuel line. So you need to use a 17mm wrench for the top and bottom fittings of the main fuel line. Remove it carefully. I'm gonna remove the bracket that holds the vacuum line. Use a 10mm wrench to remove the bolt. The last thing to remove is this electrical plug. Unlock and pull it carefully. Now pull the intake manifold assembly. Here's how the intake manifold looks like. This is the other mounting point. And the other one is here, which is hard to access. This tube is connected to the EGR, which is held down by 2 bolts. Here you can see the swerve flaps. According to the owner, the gaskets were used 4 times, but we don't have a replacement for it, so we're gonna reuse it again. The owner will buy a new gasket soon. This is the one that controls the swerve flaps. I need to remove this before I start cleaning the intake manifold. Gently push the linkage. It will pop out. The important thing is not to rotate this lever, or else it can change the calibration of the system. But don't be scared, it won't move at all. It is locked in its position. This is held down by 3 10mm bolts. Once you remove it, keep it in a safe place. Always remember not to try to rotate this lever. Grab an Allen wrench and use a close wrench as an extension. I apologize I couldn't provide the size of the Allen wrench, because I forgot to take a look on it. If you have a set of Allen wrench, just pick the closest one to the size of the bolt. Look how dirty it is. Here it has a gasket too. I'm gonna clean this throttle body with a used diesel. Just use a paintbrush to remove the dirt effectively. You can use a different brush too. After using the used diesel, I will now switch to a used gasoline. Since the gasket will be reused, carefully remove it using a small flathead screwdriver. This one is just a plain O-ring. I'm gonna reuse it and add another O-ring to make it sealed. For now, I will end this video here because it is too lengthy. The second part of the video is the continuation of cleaning, preparation, and reinstallation process. Just click the link on the screen or check in the description box below to watch the second part of the video. I hope you enjoy and find this video helpful. If it was, please give it a thumbs up. Thank you very much and God bless.